Happy Sunday, folks, and welcome to Unity of Kern County on this 31st day of May 2020. I'm Reverend Chuck, and today we continue our series on the 12 spiritual powers of faith and love, strength, judgment, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, enthusiasm, release, and of course, life. And as I've said before, if you have any questions about these powers, or if you'd like a copy of my notes, you can message me on Facebook Messenger or email me at revchuckunity@yahoo.com. And as we do each Sunday, we open with the Charles Fillmore I'm in the Presence prayer. And so we pray. I'm now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge your presence and power, O blessed Spirit. In your divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations, and from your pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to your perfect law. And so it is, your pure substance of love. And so we continue with our spiritual power, part 4 of love. And so we continue that journey. And I believe it's important that we do so because of all that is going on, not only in our own country, but in the world. We need to take stock in how we view the world in which we live and ask, what can I possibly do to help make a change? Well, the answer is simple. And it begins with starting with ourselves. As the old adage goes, the change you want to see must begin within yourself. And so in doing so, that does affect not only you, but your family and your friends that are around you. You know, it's been said that one seed planted can produce a mighty oak. And of course, one spark can create a roaring blaze. And also, one idea can generate a whole new paradigm shift in our thinking. So it's my pleasure this day to share with you a paradigm shift of love, the type of paradigm shift that made a drastic change in humanity in how they viewed God. And that paradigm shift and the idea that came from it was, of course, Jesus. And it was one that changed the individual's outlook of seeing God as a very judgmental God to one that is very loving, caring, and compassionate through the power of love. And so I'd like to share that with you today. Since 1989, Unity has taught that all the 12 spiritual powers the disciples represent in our lives, and when they are used under the Spirit's direction and the power of the living Christ within us, we form a type of bond with God. And Charles Fillmore's vision for unity that emerged during his personal conversations with the Christ within and with God was that he saw unity as the great link in the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus, and that it was unity's purpose and mission to discern the truth in Christianity, the Christianity that was taught by the Master, and give humanity practical ways in which to use and prove that in their life and in their affairs. So as an ordained unity minister myself, I wish to continue that, the teachings that Jesus taught, that unity continues to teach, and from other unity ministers and other authors that have written so much about these 12 powers that we possess, these attributes, if you will. And I'd like to share a story, start off with a story actually from John, and it's in chapter 8, verses 2 through 12. And I read, "And early in the morning Jesus came again to the temple, and the people came to him and sat down so that they could be taught. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought to him a woman that was taken in adultery, and they put her in their midst. and said to him, Master, this woman was caught in adultery, and the law of Moses commands us to stone her to death. So what do you have to say about it? Well, Jesus, knowing that they were using this to trap him, sat down and with his finger just scrolled in the sand, as if he didn't hear a word that they were saying. So they continued to press him for an answer. So he lifted himself up, and he stood amongst them and said, He who is without sin, cast the first stone. And when they heard that, it hit them at a depth that they knew not what hit them. For in their own conscience they dropped their stones and walked away. Of course, the elder first, and then the youngest. And when they'd all left, Jesus looked at the woman and said, Woman, who's here to condemn you, to accuse you? And she goes, No one, Master. Then neither do I condemn you. So go and sin no more. When Jesus told his followers that I am the light of the world, that he that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have light of life. What I find amazing about this story is that love is present as compassion and forgiveness throughout this entire story. Jesus, as God's Son and messenger, if you will, forgives her and tells her to stop using ego's human love, for it will destroy her in the end. And then Jesus, of course, as God incarnate, knows of humanity's weakness when ego tries to control human love and use it. Neither Jesus nor God condemned her, but showed love and compassion and forgiveness. For all she needs to do is go and change her behavior as sin no more. Change one's behavior by using the spiritual power of love instead of the one dictated by ego. And then Jesus turns to those who were listening and waited for him to offer his daily message, if you will. So when he said, I am the light of the world, what he is saying, I am the love of the world. And those that follow me will never walk in darkness, the darkness of hate and condemnation and false accusations, but will have life full of light. In other words, a life full of love. Isn't that what he just demonstrated? Isn't that what he just gave the woman as she went away? Martin Luther King Jr. had another take on that when he said that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And that is what Jesus exemplified. The love of God capable of bringing us out of all kinds of darkness, all kinds of trials and tribulations, if we just allow ego to follow spiritual guidance. So here are 7 thoughts that I'm going to share with you today that came to me over the course of my training in Unity as a minister, and over the years reading books from many different authors and other Unity. And so I've kind of condensed it down to 7. I mean, the list is unending, okay? But for the sake of today's message, we're bringing it down to 7. If you want more, you can always go ahead and log on to Unity and read these things for yourself. So I start with number 1. A lot can be said about the human heart and the emotion that we call love. What Jesus and other over the ages have tried to teach us is that if we allow ego to control how we love and who we love, it can be very hateful and hurtful, devastating and dehumanizing in its application, in its expression. As Charles Fillmore wrote in his book, Keep a True Lent, love that is adulterated in any degree by hatred for anything or anyone is not pure enough to discern the great love of God, which unifies all humankind. So we need to be watchful of what ego is trying to do. It separates us from God, separates us from the love that Jesus knew and taught about. Number 2, everyone at one time or another has struggled with the human condition of things that just tear their lives apart. Many of us are feeling that now, many of our loved ones and our friends. That is when we must really reach down deep within ourselves to that living Christ presence that Paul wrote about, and grab hold of that golden thread of love that is there to help us rebuild and to place us on a more solid foundation so that we can move forward and overcome any challenges, any trials, any tribulations. As Jesus said, be of good cheer, for I have overcome them. And if we are to follow his likeness, if we are to follow his teachings about love, we know that spiritual love, when activated through that Christ presence, can bring us to a reward. In his book, Be, Dillard Freeman says, until love sets us free, each of us is confined in the narrow prison of himself. And how true that is when we allow ego to have such control over our life and affairs. Number 3, we must be diligent in how we express our love and catch the warning signs of ego trying to control how it's used. If we do not express the spiritual power of love, then we run the risk of our love becoming restless, and in turn engenders fear and jealousy, possessiveness, exclusiveness. Martha Spock, in her book, Listen, Beloved, makes it a clear claim that human love may change, but God's love is unchanging. And Sue Sicking, in her book, Only Believes, reminds us that people try to love, and that is foolish, because love does not come by trying. Love is free-flowing and impossible to stop without harm. So when we manipulate love, we're in for a great heartache. So the free-flowing activity of love in our life is that spiritual love that is already innate in us. We just have to let it go. And to let it go, we must push ego aside. We must tell it, get behind me now, Satan. Get behind me, ego, so I can express the divine attribute of spiritual love in my life and in my affairs. 4, it may seem hard to practice that kind of love, using our spiritual power of love in our lives, when we hear the stories that we hear, okay? The stories of hate and violence and destruction. It may seem like there's nothing we can do, and ego's there to play on that, to build on that. So it's at those times that we have to remember the words spoken by Jesus when he said, the things that I've done you will do also, and greater will you do. And to remember those inspiring words offered by St. Paul when he said that the Christ in you is your hope of glory. 5, by reminding ourselves that we have the power to draw from that living spirit of the Christ within, we are able to push ego aside then and practice loving our neighbor as ourselves. Even if we don't understand their ways or like what they do, knowing that spiritual love is caring and desiring the highest good for all concerned, we know that what we want for ourselves, we must also want for others. And 6, we must remember that love does not hate evil, because love cannot hate. As God's beloved children, made in God's image, we have God's love within us. It's what Martha Spock called a radiating center of divine love, mighty to attract our good and to radiate that good to others. Spiritual love means compassion, involvement, where there is a need to be met. And I believe that story in John shows how true that is. For Jesus taught and showed that spiritual love was like with that woman caught in adultery. He expressed it to her. He loved her as a human being, caught up in the ego attempt to control how she expressed human love. And the need that she needed to be met was the need of forgiveness, which he gave her. And finally, 7, Jesus taught that love is the life in its fullness. Love is the purest activity of spirit. Love is the drawing, unifying power of life and the highest of all the spiritual laws. For we will attract, acquire, and become that which we love. We must operate within it if we are to be safe and to build and to hold on our faith. For what you hold in your heart, the measure you give is the measure you'll get. And for me, the measure has to be the power of spiritual love given to all in this world. And so, until next week, I'll leave you with this thought about expressing that spiritual power of love as a foundation for expressing our spiritual power of strength. As Margaret Ponders wrote in her book, Laws of Love, love does not mean giving in to another's every whim, nor is it becoming subservient or a slave to others, either physically or emotionally. For love loves for itself. Love is strong, and because it is strong, it is the constructive expression of that love that builds the foundation of strength so that we can go forth to do what is ours to do. So I wish to thank all of you that continue to follow me on Facebook and, of course, YouTube, and for the financial support you give to this Unity ministry. I am grateful for that. And so, dear friends, until next week, God bless you, and may you have a blessed, filled day.